Hey everybody, and welcome back. Super excited to have our day 3 of looking at kind of climate change and some of the main topic, the main button issues that go into it. Of course, there's so many things we could go into with climate change. We could spend weeks, months, and years on this. Obviously, we could go so much more in depth, but the whole purpose of this, like we've been saying each episode, is to give you the quick, down to the point, give you some talking points so that if someone is trying to converse you in these things or someone is trying to talk to you about these things, you have some background knowledge so you can have that conversation to open doors. So remember, that's what we're doing here. We're not doing super in-depth, deep, 100% teachings. It is, I want to prepare you all for conversations with people. That way you can open doors to show God's word and how God works in these conversations. And like I said last time, I'm working on doing something that's even deeper. So if you do want to know more of like the in-depth and the really nitty-gritty stuff, we will go into that too, just not on a YouTube series. That'll be something that we go into somewhere else. So on this YouTube series, really trying to get us to start those conversations, be active in those conversations, at least have some idea of what we're talking about so that we don't lose it all. So I'm super glad you're back. It makes me so happy. I've been having such a blast doing this, so we're going to keep going. So day number 3, if you remember from the video 3 weeks ago, the intro, we're going to be talking about carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases. So we're going to be kind of giving an overview of what these are, what they do, why are they important, why are they yelled about so much in the media. So we're going to start off with what are greenhouse gases. And greenhouse gases are simply gases that trap heat in the atmosphere. So the more of them that there are, the hotter it should be. Because what they do is, as the UV radiation comes down, it is absorbed by the ground and then it is released by the ground again. So as a different type of radiation. And these gases block that radiation from leaving back out of the atmosphere. So these greenhouse gases, if there's more of them in the atmosphere, that radiation coming from the ground cannot escape and it gets trapped and it keeps bouncing back and forth. So that's why you hear about greenhouse gases so much, because the more of them that are in the atmosphere, the more likely that that radiation is going to hit some of the molecules and come back down and not escape. And that is why it gets warmer when there's more greenhouse gases there. That is also how a greenhouse works. The glass on a greenhouse lets radiation in, but after that radiation is absorbed by the plants, it releases a different type of radiation. So we have something called the electromagnetic spectrum, which has all different wavelengths. Light is a type of radiation. It is a wavelength. You have X-rays, you have ultraviolet, you have gamma rays, you have infrared rays. So all these are types of radiation. Some are harmful, some are not. But greenhouse gases let ultraviolet rays through, but then the radiation, the wavelengths that are released from the ground, cannot get back through those as easily, and that's where the trapping happens. So I have a little breakdown here because we hear about greenhouse gases all the time, but a lot of times it seems like carbon dioxide is the only greenhouse gas. Now, while it is the most abundant in our atmosphere, it is not the only one. So carbon dioxide is 81% of the greenhouse gases. Then we got methane is 10%, nitrous oxide is 7%, and fluorinated gases are 3%. Now, these percentages are of greenhouse gases. They are not of the gases in our atmosphere. There are more gases. There's oxygen, there's nitrogen, there's other gases in our atmosphere. These are just a list of the greenhouse gases. And then that last one, fluorinated gas. So these are things called hydrofluorocarbons, perfluorocarbons, sulfur hexafluoride. These are the big chemicals that are synthetic, powerful greenhouse gases. So synthetic, they're man-made. They are made by us, and they are emitted from a lot of different industrial processes. Now, these are only 3% of the greenhouse gases, but they're actually really, really potent global warming potential gases. So the GWPs, if you ever hear of a GWP, that's a global warming potential gas. Now these are 3%, but they are said to make up the most warming. So if we look at this, we do see carbon dioxide as the highest percentage there. But it is not the only one. It's the one we hear about the most often. And it's the one that we kind of blow the horn about because of graphs that we're going to look at later. So what we're going to look at now is we know what the greenhouse gases are. We're going to take a quick look at global greenhouse gas emissions by economic sector. So this is from EPA.gov, so Environmental Protection Agency.gov. What they list is that electricity and heat production is 25%. So that's when you burn coal, you're getting those oils, all that stuff. So electricity and heat, 25%. We see that a lot in the news and stuff when we're going for the green energy, which is something I think we're going to talk about next week or the week after about, is that really that green, or is it just a facade on the face where if you look down deeper, it might not be as good. Then we have agriculture, forestry, and other land use comes in at 24% of greenhouse gas emissions. We're going to talk about that one in a second because this chart, you could use it and it would skew it to look like ag isn't good. So we'll talk about that here in a second. Industry, 21%. Transportation, 14%. So something really interesting to take a look at there is we're talking all about these, we need electric cars, we need to stop burning fossil fuels in our cars, we need to stop doing that. That only comes in at 14% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. So transportation, and this is including buses, planes, trains, this is transportation, coming at 14% of the emissions. Buildings come in at 6%. So buildings like your house comes in at 6%. Yes, your home does give off greenhouse gases. Concrete even does. It's not at huge levels, obviously. But if we look at that, transportation only gives off twice as much, a little bit more than twice as much greenhouse gases than buildings do. So when you hear this whole, everyone like crying, we need to get green cars, we need to get electric cars. Well, that's going to go back over to that electricity and industry, which give off a total of 46% together. So it's going to be feeding into these other ones that already give off a lot. And that's where this argument kind of falls flat is industry, electricity, and heat production give off 46% combined. Transportation is only 14%. If we go to electricity, if we go to electric cars and that type of thing, well, electricity production is going to have to go up to give all those cars energy to move, which in turn would probably increase industry to make these new cars. So really I wanted to show this graph because if we look at this slice of the pie, transportation is right there. Here's those buildings, like I said. Here's the electrical, here's the industry, and here's that ag piece that we were talking about. So I wanted to come back to that ag piece because it says that it does 24%. And then in the fine print, they like to add this in. This estimate does not include the CO2 that ecosystems remove from the atmosphere by sequestering carbon in biomass, dead organic matter, and soils, which offset approximately 20% of emissions from this sector. So what that is saying is that 24% does not calculate in the crops that are growing, how much carbon they take from the atmosphere, because those crops take the carbon dioxide and scrub the atmosphere of that carbon. Dead things do the same thing. They're not looking at how the forests take away carbon from the atmosphere. They're only looking at how it gets added. So this really is a skewed data because this little sliver right here should actually be about 4%, the net total. So after you look at what it takes out of the atmosphere, so it gives 24% in, but it takes 20% out. So this is only a net of 4%. That's not that much. That's actually the least greenhouse producing sector there is. So agriculture, forestry, and other land use actually give off the least amount of greenhouse gases when you look at how much they take from the atmosphere as well. Because that's the only one that you will see there that actually takes and scrubs the carbon from the atmosphere and makes it cleaner. Now, the problem with this is if we were to be given this graph, we wouldn't have this bell paragraph here. We would just be given this and cried, ag is not good, cow farts are killing us. When in all reality, the grass that the cows are grazing relies on the cows to live, and that grass is taking carbon out of that atmosphere and scrubbing it free. And remember, methane is only 10% of the greenhouse gases. It's the second most, but it's only 10%. So those are greenhouse gases. You've heard about them. You've heard them in the news probably. You've heard them been called that they're awful. We need them to survive. Greenhouse gases, if we got rid of them, we would not live because it would be too cold. God knew what he was doing when he made greenhouse gases. When God created the heavens and the earth in Genesis, he created a balance that was to be kept. And this balance gave us the greenhouse gases in order to warm the planet to where it needed to be. He gave us that atmosphere. God created the atmosphere in order to trap those greenhouse gases in to keep heat and keep us warm. So we need those greenhouse gases because God designed our planet to use those for our warmth and designed it to be a habitat for us to live in safely, comfortably, and to thrive in. He created it for us to thrive. If we tried to get rid of the greenhouse gases, who knows what would happen, because this was created in a way to work. And this is where we get into, if it wasn't created with a purpose in mind, then we can start talking about, well, what would happen if we did scrub the greenhouse gases away? What would happen now, or this? We can get on to those what ifs. If you believe that the world was an accident and not a creation, there is a purpose for the greenhouse gases. They serve their purpose. They are needed. They are important. And without them, we would die. We have to put greenhouse gases into the atmosphere in order to maintain a balance. Now, of course, we don't want to put them in too fast, but we're not going to destroy the earth. New York should be underwater by now, apparently, and it's not. Florida, same thing. As we looked 2 weeks ago, there's been plenty of times in Earth's history, according to science. Now, this is according to their own figures, that the polar ice caps were gone, but apparently we're evil because they're receding again, even though they've already receded and been completely gone in the past. So we need to look at all these things in great detail and see where science is contradicting itself, because if it contradicts itself, it cannot be true. Where the Bible does not contradict itself, we know that it is true, and we know in the Genesis, the creation story, God created the heavens and the earth. He created everything on the earth, in the earth, and surrounding the earth. So we know that it has a purpose, and it works for a divine purpose perfectly. So the second thing we're going to talk about today is carbon emissions. We talked about carbon dioxide, so we're going to look at carbon emissions. That's a lot of the times the hot button topic. So we remember from last week when we talked about carbon dating. Radiocarbon dating is only accurate to 70,000 years. We have data for carbon dioxide up to 800,000 years. So there's something a little off there. It's 10 times further back than what we can be accurate for, but we use it as absolute fact. And now a lot of people say, no, it's not absolute fact, but we use it as absolute fact. And that is where we get into the problem of, this is not absolute fact. This is predictions. This is estimates. This is best guesses. Now, to get these emissions, so you'll see those carbon dioxide graphs, and I'll show you here really quick. This top one is the one we're going to be looking at for now. You'll see it goes back to 800, and this is in thousands of years, so 800,000 years. Now that graph, we get those levels from ice cores. And the oldest ice core that we have is from Antarctica, and it's about, what they say is it goes back to 800,000 years. And now they do this by aging the ice and then aging the gas that is trapped inside of the ice. The age of the gas is usually different than the age of the ice. So the ice surrounding the gas doesn't really match the same age as the gas itself. It's really predictions because no one was there 800,000 years ago. We have to remember that. If we look at what we believe from the Bible, we weren't here 800,000 years ago, and neither was the earth. So we need to keep that in mind here. Now, this came from Antarctica, and we're going to be looking at this chart in comparison to our chart from 2 weeks ago. So this is the chart where if you would have gone online, you could have found this. So we're going to be comparing it to this chart. One thing we need to remember here is that on this chart, we are over here. So this is 100,000 years ago. You see, they were going down, and then they spike again, and now we're way up here. So they want to be like, oh, this is scary. We're really, 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 really bad right now. Forget about all these spikes that have happened, it spikes over time. And now to put this into perspective, of what we're talking about. This goes back 800,000 years. For the last 50 million years, according to their calculations, according to science, according to the calculations that we have been given, for the last 50 million years. So we'll see right here on this graph that 50 million. For the last 50 million years, we have had polar ice caps. For the last 50 million years. 800,000, 50 million. Now, we do not have data for these peaks over here. Where according to what everybody is freaking out about, according to that, if carbon dioxide levels increase too quickly, we are going to lose the polar ice caps. Well, we know from this graph that happens. According to science, we do lose the ice caps. It's happened for millennia, according to them. Now, I'm telling you what their own evidence is telling them. But they're saying that because of this spike, it's all on humans. Now, remember, we're right here for 50 million years. We've had ice caps. We don't have data for these high points. We don't have data from science to say, what's happening here? What is the carbon dioxide? What are those quantities looking like according to you all? Wouldn't those be higher according to your things, according to what you're saying? The greenhouse gases should have been higher back here. But we don't have the data past 800,000 years, but we make it seem like we do. Science and the agenda there for global warming is trying to make it seem like it is doomsday for us and we are the cause of it, when in reality there's no way for us to know. And the ultimate reality is God has created our planet to sustain us and to sustain itself. We need to take care of it. But God, if we are listening to global warming, we are listening to God created a creation that we could destroy through global warming. Seems to me like our God wouldn't create something that he knew we were going to then destroy because we couldn't take care of it. God wouldn't have given us carbon if he didn't know we were going to use it. He knew we were going to use these things. He knew we were going to produce these things. So he put it here for us to use. We are allowed to use it. Don't let people think that you are not allowed to use the things God has created for us. God created all this carbon. God created all these things for us to use. And when they put these graphs together, when they show you these graphs and they say we're the cause of it, remember, they don't have enough data to support their claim, but they'll throw it at you anyways. They'll say it's 100% true, even though they can't support it with their own science. They'll forget about their science as soon as they want to prove a point. They'll go away from the science. Science is only, in global warming, science is only convenient when it fits the agenda for it. But if you start to look at the science, you realize that it actually contradicts itself every step of the way. Every step of the way, it contradicts what it is saying. And then, for fun, I threw in the one that everybody loves to talk about, and that is the ozone layer. So the ozone layer is important for us, and God put it there for a purpose because it absorbs most ultraviolet or UV radiation from the sun. Without the ozone layer, there'd be a lot more sunburns. There'd be a lot more dead things. I was going to say, without the ozone layer, we couldn't survive here. God put the ozone layer in so that we could have the perfect temperatures, just like before. Now, the ozone layer is composed of 3 oxygens. And these 3 oxygens are formed in kind of like a triangle. And something very, very interesting about these 3 oxygens is that carbon dioxide actually does not break them down. So carbon dioxide does not break down the ozone layer. You'll be told that it does, but it does not. Carbon dioxide doesn't break it down. There are other chemicals, however, that do. These chemicals are called CFCs and HCFCs. So these are chlorofluorocarbons, so they have chlorines in them, or hydrochlorofluorocarbons. So again, they have chlorines. Chlorine and bromine are halogens. They will break down ozone layer. They will break down O3. So each chlorine atom can break down about 1,000 atoms of ozone is what they say. So these CFCs and HCFCs are the big things. Now, they were used a lot of times in aerosols, so like hairsprays and that kind of stuff. So that's why they say when you're using those hairsprays all the time, you're putting CFCs into the atmosphere. Those are what break down the ozone layer. Refrigerants have them. There are lots of things that have them. However, something very interesting, and I do have another little chart here because, yes, I love graphs that prove our points. So these are the size, the average ozone hole area. And they take this data from the 7th of September to the 13th of October because that's usually when it shows up, the ozone layer or the ozone hole, because not there all the year. It recedes and then grows. Now, they have data from 1979 through 2024. And something really interesting here is that, yes, it does sort of show a trend, if you see, of growing here. But then if you look here, something very interesting that you'll find is that, and this one, we're not going to talk about this one. I just couldn't grab this graph without this one. And this is the whole, this is the size. This is in kilometers. Now, something interesting you'll see here is it's plateaued. So for the past about 20 years, it's been about constant. You know, it's fluctuated up and down around the spot. It's even dropped sometimes, but it's never gotten more than 27 kilometers. 2020, it was 24 kilometers, so it was actually decreased. 2019, it was very, very small. So something that this shows is that this has kind of stayed consistent. It hasn't grown. It's not getting bigger. It's just there. It's part of what needs to happen. And now, I don't know why. I don't know why God created that to happen, but it is part of the plan for our atmosphere, for our world to survive. That ozone layer, that hole, has a purpose. And I, for one, am going to be very, very curious to know that answer one day. But it is an answer that, you know, it's not found in the Bible. That's the answer to why the ozone hole appears. You can't find an answer to that because God doesn't mention the ozone layer and say, yeah, I make the ozone hole appear every once in a while or once a year because this needs to happen, X, Y, and Z. But it does happen. And from the data we have for at least the past, 25, 30, 40 years, let's see, we have 79, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 14. So since 1993, so almost for 30 years, it's been about stable. So for almost 30 years, it hasn't been growing bigger. It's been growing to the same size every year, which means it's supposed to happen like that. That gives us a good idea, like if it grows to the same size every year, maybe it's something that's supposed to be happening. We'll find out one day. And now, what I want to do really quick is just bring us back to where we can find some of this in the Bible, where we can turn to some things to prove our points on this. So we're going to go back to Ecclesiastes again, same verse, and we're going to do what has been will be again, what has been done will be done again. There's nothing new under the sun. So there's nothing new under the sun. When God created the earth, he created everything that was here, every atom, every molecule, every piece of matter. So when he created the earth, he created matter. He created everything that is on earth, everything that will be, and we can follow that up by we cannot create or destroy matter. It is a law that you cannot create or destroy matter or energy. It can only be used and then repurposed. It cannot be destroyed. Now it can become unusable, but it is still there. Matter is always there. And so matter, when we're talking about this, is like carbon. So carbon dioxide is matter. The carbon and the oxygens that make up carbon dioxide, there have always been this many carbons. There will always be this many carbons. There have always been this many oxygens. There will always be this many oxygens. Methane is just carbon and hydrogens together. It is CH4. So it's one carbon with 4 hydrogens around it. It is an organic molecule. All those hydrogens, always been here, will always be here. All those carbons, always been here, will always be here. We'll look more into these laws later, but really cool that God created all this carbon for us. He knew we were going to use it. He didn't create it and say, you're not going to use this. He knew we were going to use it, so it was created. Is there anything of which one can say, look, this is something new? Now we have cars. We say that, but the matter that goes into the car. So let's break it down. To a subatomic particle, there is nothing new. To an atomic particle size, there is nothing new, atomic level. That car might look new. These cell phones that we get to have, the new iPhone, all that, it might look new. But those atoms have been around since the beginning of time. They are not new. They look new, but they are made of things that we cannot see, and they have been around since the beginning of time. So it is not new. It isn't a new form. It can change forms, but it is not new. Those atoms are the same atoms. The day God created Earth, the atoms that were on Earth when God created it now make up your phones, now make up my shirt, now make up us. Isn't that so amazing? Like those atoms God created are still in us from the very beginning. The atoms that God breathed life into are still in us everywhere. And then we'll go right into what I was just talking about. In the beginning, God created the heavens and earth. God created all the atoms that we would ever need, ever, and they're still here. He knew exactly how much to make. Exactly how much to make. Nothing has been added. Nothing has been taken away. And the simple fact is that the carbon dioxide we put into the atmosphere, that carbon has always been here. It will always be here. It will never be destroyed. If we destroy it, we are simply just changing its form. We cannot destroy matter. Matter is here, and matter will always be here. And I just think it's so awesome that at the beginning of creation, God knew exactly how much of everything we needed. He gave it to us. And now, remember that whenever anyone tells you not to use what God gave you, say, God gave it to me. He created it for this purpose in mind. He knew this was going to be used, and I'm going to keep doing it. All right, God bless you all, and I am excited to see you next week. Have a good one.